Release of the first part of the state capture report has raised questions about the balance between active citizenry, patriotism and opportunistic acts of corruption for financial gain. That is after the huge praise heaped on whistleblowers who risked their lives and provided key information to the inquiry. Joining us to talk more about this then is the Daily Maverick Editor, Mark Heywood. Mark, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the program. So one of the recommendations from the state capture inquiry is that whistleblowers whose evidence leads directly to the recovery of looted money then be compensated a fixed amount. Do you think that will encourage more people to come forward and provide crucial information?
Good evening and thank you. Temekile, before I get to that point, I think it's important to situate that recommendation in the full context of the report. Deputy Chief Justice Zondo acknowledges, as you have just done, the crucial role that whistleblowers have played at great risk to themselves. And at the end of the report, in fact, at the very, very end, volume 3 of this first report makes a set of recommendations about how there can be better protections for the lives and livelihoods and well-being of whistleblowers. And I think we need to look at each of those recommendations, individually, because collectively they should improve the prospects and the livelihoods of people. So, for example, they recommend that there should be amendments to legislation to better protect whistleblowers. They recommend that the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which South Africa is a signatory to, should be specifically applied when it comes to whistleblower protection. And then, as you mentioned in your introduction, they say that in certain circumstances, and it's important to state this because Justice Zondo is not recommending a blank check, that the anti-procurement, the Public Procurement Anti-Corruption Agency should be authorized to enter into agreements with certain whistleblowers for compensation in relation to information that they may provide that leads to money being recovered for the state. So I think what I'm saying is that Justice Zondo has chosen his words very, very carefully in the recommendations that he has made with regards to whistleblowing, and they should be welcome.
I was reading a comment that Athol Williams gave to one of the other media houses where he said that whistleblowers need a package of support, he said, that speaks to legal, financial, health and reputational needs as well as risks. Are the recommendations from this report then sufficient to that degree?
Well, that's right. There's a need for a package of support. That's exactly the point. Now, I would say that the recommendations in the report are very important. They take us further than we have been before, and it's important that these recommendations come from the State Capture Commission, not from an NGO, not just from whistleblowers themselves, but from a body like this. But I don't think that they are specific enough in recognizing the needs of whistleblowers, as you just mentioned, for support with health, for financial support, for support with loss of livelihoods. But this report should be seen as a starting point. It's a set of recommendations that I personally believe should be implemented as swiftly as possible, that should not wait the final report or the responses of President Mandela, of President Ramaphosa, but they need to be built upon.
And how do we begin the process to build upon that? Because even before the release of this report, the likes of President Cyril Ramaphosa had been saying they take quite seriously the issue, the need especially for protection for whistleblowers. You've got someone like Babita Deokaran, whose death is believed to be linked to the fact that she too was a whistleblower in PPE corruption in Gauteng. The allegations were centered there. You've got Athol Williams, whom I referenced, who, as we sit tonight, has had to abandon country and family because he simply did not feel safe anymore in a country of his birth where he leaves so much of his life behind because he's been forced to by this lack of protection.
Well, I think you touched an important point, which is that many whistleblowers, including crucial witnesses such as Cynthia Stimple, such as Atul Williams, are expressing frustration, anger, disappointment that although much praise, much lip service has been given to their contribution, it has not been followed up with concrete actions. And in most instances, they have been left vulnerable, unprotected, and unsupported. And I think that that is a very poor situation for people whose sacrifices and contributions have made possible the unraveling of state capture. We wouldn't have had this state capture commission if it wasn't for the Gupta leaks, if it wasn't for other whistleblowers who came forward several years ago to tell what was going on, the levels of corruption in procurement and so on and so on. So really we have to cross a river, and the river that we have to cross is one between giving faint praise, if you like, to whistleblowers and taking concrete measures that will protect people's lives and secure their futures.
To the earlier question then about the recommendation for compensation, fixed compensation for people whose evidence or whistleblowing leads to the recovery of looted funds from the state. Some have said that should not even have to happen because reporting corruption should be a patriotic duty. How do you respond to that?
Well, reporting corruption should be and has been a patriotic duty, and all of the whistleblowers that we've been talking about tonight have done so selflessly and because they believe in the Constitution and because they stand for the rule of law. But there are many whistleblowers or people who contemplate whistleblowing who are afraid of the consequences, who are afraid of loss of life, of loss of jobs. And therefore, incentivizing whistleblowing in very strict circumstances, I believe, can be justified. And as I said a few minutes ago, Tembekile, what is proposed by the Zondo Commission is not just that we have an open door policy that anybody who comes forward with allegations of corruption will automatically be offered compensation, some sort of bounty for whistleblowing. It is a recommendation that authorizes the proposed public procurement anti-corruption agency in certain circumstances to enter into agreements with whistleblowers where the whistleblowing will lead to the recovery of public funds. So Judge Zondo has framed it, I think, very carefully and very narrowly, and in that way has, if you like, opened a discussion about how widely this should be affected.
Okay, final question then. As the President goes through this report and we wait for the implementation of the full thing, because he said he's going to wait for all three parts of the report to be in and then ultimately report to Parliament, and then we'll get a sense of what his plan of action is going to be. What does he need to do in the interim for whistleblowers in this country?
A great deal is the answer. There's nothing that stops President Ramaphosa, the government, the cabinet, from acting on these recommendations today and tomorrow morning. I think that it would be very important for them to send a signal that acknowledges the contribution of whistleblowers and says we recognize that you are vulnerable now as we talk now. You've seen, I saw your interview with Cynthia Stimple on Newzroom Afrika last night, where she talked about, again, the surge of new threats, new fears that she faces because this report has now been published. There's a need to act as soon as possible and not to wait. And I think there's a responsibility on us as journalists and on members of the public and on political parties to build a clamor for action on this particular part of the report with immediate effect.
Mark Heywood, editor at Maverick Citizen. Good to speak to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.